Hello, Feuzion. We have another live Sports Fusion episode with the lovely Miss Rivera, Marley Rivera. She's a national ESPN bilingual baseball reporter. So, Miss Rivera, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. I'm here in the West Coast in Seattle. Strangely enough, I have in the dark days of summer haven't been very summery. I came from San Francisco and then Seattle, and I haven't seen temperatures above 60 degrees. So I'm kind of missing the East Coast today.
Yeah. So you're with the Yankees right now, reporting on them. So what was the big takeaway from last night's game against the Mariners?
Well, I think it's almost like I think it's pretty obvious when you see what Gary Sanchez has done. He's unstoppable. He becomes the first player, not first catcher, first player in the history of the New York Yankees to get 8 home runs in his first 19 games. So when you see that, when you see those kind of numbers, and the funny thing is that we've been joking for a long time. One of the beat writers for the Cincinnati Reds, his name is Trent Close-Craft, and he's a friend of mine, and we were joking around during the Futures game that when Gary Sanchez was playing, he was saying, Gary Sanchez is still the future of the Yankees. We've been hearing about Gary Sanchez for so long.
Yeah.
And this is the Gary Sanchez that we expected. It was very cool to see him fulfill the promise of this young kid who came to the organization at 16. So this is, 10 years in the making when we're seeing this Gary Sanchez perform the way he is.
So what do you think is next for Gary Sanchez moving forward?
I think that he continues to do what he does. He has to be the everyday player. The Yankees are going to have to make some decisions with Brian McCann. This is one of the things, and I was talking to Gary yesterday about this. I asked him, what is it that you're performing? And he's a very shy kid, doesn't really know how to explain to you why he's having this level of success, but he tells you that it's playing time, that it's being regular, right? Like playing on a daily basis, being a starting catcher, similar to kind of what the Cubs did with Wilson Contreras, which is something that we're doing, with a young catcher and leaving Miguel Montero behind. It's sort of what the Yankees have to do. So they got to figure out what they're going to do with that Brian McCann contract. It wouldn't surprise me if they get rid of it, but they're going to have to eat up a lot of money if they do.
And one player that is kind of leaving the Yankees at the end of this year who's retiring is Mark Teixeira. So the Yankees haven't really been using Mark Teixeira. They've been using Tyler Austin, who is another young guy that has come up to the Yankees in the past week. And Tyler Austin hasn't really been performing as well as the Yankees hoped, whereas the first 2 games he performed. So moving forward, do you think Mark Teixeira is going to move back into that starting first baseman role?
I don't know. You know what? That's a very good question, but I just kind of think that I don't see it happening. I see Mark Teixeira mostly finishing his career most of the games as a DH for the Yankees, but then who knows? You know what? If there's one thing that Mark Teixeira can still do very, very well is that beautiful Gold Glove. I mean, his defensive prowess is you can take away, and you can see that he's been injury prone the last couple of years, and we've seen that, especially with the surgery he had to get in his wrist. And we can say many things, about his offense. Mark Teixeira's defense is so stellar. He's still a pleasure to watch. Every once in a while you get glimpses of that Gold Glove. So it would be smart for the Yankees if they get into a race. What I would tell you is, this is complete speculation. This isn't coming from some sort of higher up knowledge. Complete speculation. The Yankees right now, being 6.5 games, I haven't checked the latest standings of the wild card chase. If they really get into it, which obviously is going to be very difficult, they have a lot of teams to surpass, I can see them using Mark Teixeira defensively more. Because that kind of figure, that really solid, spectacular defense that Mark Teixeira can bring, then I can see that at first base. I think if they stay with where they are, where the wild card is still a little bit far away, I think we're just going to see the young kids continue playing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And we'll switch gears
you agree
now.
with me, thanks.
Yeah, and one team that you mentioned about the Cubs, and Kris Bryant is completely tearing the ball apart with his bat. So moving forward with the Cubs, Kris Bryant is obviously their #1 star. Do you see this Cubs making the playoffs? Or I think this year is the year for the Cubs to win the World Series. What about you?
I don't know. World Series is another thing. And now I'm going to tell you something very, very important. And I think you know this, and we can look back at what the Kansas City Royals did and how the Mets made their playoff run, which is what they're getting hurt right now. They need rotation, and they need them to perform very well. The Cubs pitching isn't performing off to par lately. So now, of course, we can say that the Kris Bryants, the Rizzos of the world, even Addison Russell is getting into the party lately. And we see what Jorge Soler can do. We've seen what Javi Baez can do at times. Even Miguel Montero can be offensively. But Their pitching has suffered so much. Their relievers, and the fact that we don't know what we're going to see from Pedro Strop when he comes back from meniscus surgery, which is a very severe surgery, especially for a pitcher. And then we don't know what's going to be with Hector Rondon. So definitely the Cubs making the playoffs. I mean, the lead that they have in the NL Central, it would take a major, major collapse, and a team of that caliber is not going to go through a collapse that is not going to see them, get into the playoffs. But winning a World Series requires a stellar rotation and a stellar reliever, and I just don't see them there. Okay. Now, who is going to compete with them? Who knows? Because you know what? If you look on the other side, it's one, at least on the AL side, I just don't know that anyone can compete against them. But on the NL side, you have the Washington Nationals. And the Washington Nationals, if they do stay healthy, and if the Washington Nationals keep those, that reliever core intact and healthy, they can really, really challenge the Cubs for that top spot in the NL.
I have to also agree with you with that. And a lot of people higher up, the reporters, are saying that they see the Cubs and the Red Sox in the World Series. Do you think the Red Sox have? I don't think they had the best starting rotation or even a bullpen in baseball to even make the playoffs right now. They're kind of slipping away. So what about you?
I agree with you in a sense, but the thing is that a lot of the AL teams, if I had to pick one, if you made me pick a team today, I would say the Texas Rangers are the ones who make the World Series from the AL. But let's just be very careful with that. And like you said, all these teams, especially, and let's just talk about the two top AL teams, in my thinking, and we can't leave, obviously, the Toronto Blue Jays with that devastating offense behind. But if we talk about Boston Red Sox, and we also talk about the Texas Rangers, these are two teams that have a lot of imperfect rotations, and you said it yourself, and they're relief core. Now, if we compare the relief core, certainly the Texas Rangers have the upper hand. They really added, especially two arms into that bullpen, and they've gotten a lot better. The Red Sox are still missing some key pieces, and they've gotten some recent injuries that are really affecting them. And not only that, we haven't seen, at moments their closer perform like that all-star closer we got used to see with the Atlanta Braves. So then I think that it is going to come down to pitching, but if I had to pick one today, it would be the Texas Rangers. I don't know, the Red Sox, the one thing that they would need is for Eduardo Rodriguez to stay healthy, and not only that, to see what David Price can do.
Yeah.
If David Price and Eduardo Rodriguez become great, I mean, that rotation with two great lefties can really do some damage.
Yeah, and Ms. Rivera, before we wrap up this interview, I want to ask you, like I mentioned at the beginning of this show, you're a bilingual ESPN sports reporter for baseball. So I want to ask you, what is the hardest part of being a bilingual language sports reporter?
I think there's a positive, so let's talk about the positives first. Obviously, we're talking about a sport when I cover baseball. It's a sport that a third of the players speak Spanish. So I obviously automatically have a huge advantage in the fact that I can communicate with players in their native language. That gives me a huge advantage because many players, and I'm going to use as an example just because we started talking about it, is Gary Sanchez. He's a kid whose English is very deficient. He's working on it, but it's still very deficient. And it feels very uncomfortable expressing through a translator. It's so much easier to get a player's thoughts in their native language. Just imagine if you had to explain your deepest feelings in a moment of, deep emotion and try to say it in a language that is not natural to you. It sometimes even happens to me, even though I've studied English for a very long time. So, Spanish is still my first language. For me, it's easier to express my thoughts and feelings in Spanish. But there's a lot of challenges that come not only for being bilingual, just as being a woman who is a reporter, even though, those barriers have been broken a very long time ago, so I'm never going to use an excuse like that a girl has problems in a clubhouse because I'm much older now. I think those problems happened when I was in my 20s. I am way past that now, so I think that I handle those situations that come with being a female reporter in the clubhouse very well and differently now. But the bilingual aspect comes to the fact that sometimes there's a lot of resentment from your fellow reporters because you're speaking to players in their language, and sometimes there's doubt. And sometimes people doubt what you write or what you say because someone told you in Spanish and you translated it. So I think that's sort of the biggest challenge that I have found. But in general, being a bilingual sports reporter is nothing but an asset. I feel very, very lucky, and I feel like I have a little bit of a step up the game, above everyone else when I cover baseball.
Okay, Mr. Rivera, I want to say thanks for taking the time out of it's your morning because you're on the west side over there, so thanks for taking the time out of your morning to come on the Sports Fusion episode.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I love Sports Fusion, and I'll just be at your service whenever you want. We'll do like a Spanish episode one day.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds good.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Okay, you just heard it from Marley Rivera, who is an ESPN bilingual sports reporter. You can go back watch all of my other episodes from today. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at AlexFeuz, and I'll put Marley Rivera's Twitter handle in the section below this video. Thank you, Feuzion, for watching. I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.